Hello everyone, welcome back to another stream where we're analyzing the lore of Bloodborne as well as comparing the English text to what I've retranslated from the Japanese version of the game. Yesterday we went through Yahar'gul, took care of the Dark Beast Parl. We finished off going through the front, like the early portion of Cathedral Ward and the Healing Church Workshop, and we also did the second step to Eileen's quest with helping her kill the old hunter Henryk. And after you defeat Henryk, you can go to the Insight Bath, I believe, and be able to purchase his outfit. So, Henryk's hunter cap. It's a hunter's hat worn by Henryk, the old hunter. The taciturn old hunter Henryk was once partners with Father Gascoigne, and though they were a fierce and gallant duo, their partnership led to Henryk's tragically long life. Henryk's unique yellow garb is resistant to bolt and will be of great help to any hunter who has inherited the onus of the hunt. There's some very interesting differences, in my opinion, when compared to the Japanese version of this text. So, for example, a lot of people are a little bit unsure what it means when it's talking about Henryk's tragically long life. In Japanese, the term is a little bit literally stated as Henryk was unable to find a place to die, which would not translate very well at all, like taken literally. So the idea behind that is, like, within Japanese culture, if a person is extremely strong, they want to like keep challenging strong opponents, and to like fight and live honorably and receive an honorable death. They don't want to just kind of fade away into obscurity and become weak. Like, they want to die essentially like within their prime as like a warrior. It's really tied to that kind of warrior culture. So this description is supposed to be a kind of testament to the strength of Henryk as an old hunter. There's always that old a saying about like never trust an old man in a young man's profession, with Henryk as well. Hello, Wenders. Welcome back to the stream. Nice to have you again. So the other portion of this description, which is a little bit different, is the final line about hunters who have inherited the onus of the hunt. This concept of inheriting the onus of the hunt is tied to the concept of dying wills, which I've mentioned before, mostly in conjunction to blood echoes. The translators might not have like realized that the word for will in this context was supposed to be kind of a reference to the same will that is brought up within blood echoes. So the Japanese for that last like little paragraph is, however, this peculiar yellow colored attire is particularly strong to lightning and may save a hunter beasts. You will gain the wills and inherit them, which also ties into the air rune, which he did give us. I don't remember looking at that, so we can examine that now. Air. It's a carol rune that transcribes inhuman sounds. The air sees a sentimentality in the warmth of blood and acknowledges visceral attacks as one of the darker hunter techniques. More blood echoes gained from visceral attacks. Perhaps the air is a hunter who bears the echoing will of those before him. Oh, I do remember reading this now, but it does tie into Henryk's the description of his attire and things like that. I don't think the rest of his set's description varies much. It's pretty well the same. And that's the last new item we got from there. I don't think we got any more badges to see if there's more items in here. Looks like we can get bloodstone shards, or is it the ritual blood that's new? I know ritual blood was in here before. So with that being done, I just want to backtrack to Central Yharnam and talk to the fake Iosefka. I should have done it when it was still fresh when it happened, but we sent the little girl to the clinic, and so I just want to highlight what sending in non-playable character to the clinic will bring about.
Oh, hello. You're all right. Very good. She's safe with me now. I presume you're to thank? The treatment is going well. Stabilized, for the most part. Fascinating, really. Here you are, as promised.
So she hands us lead elixir. The description of this is, it's got some issues, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And hello, Soda. It's nice to see you again. You have class in a few, but you support the lore. I appreciate that for sure. Thank you for stopping by.
Oh, thank goodness you came. Be a dear. Find me some more.
And the concept that I talked about, like the kind of sinister evil laughter, or laughter being a kind of sign of madness, is a lot more is a lot highlighted more here with the false Iosefka when compared to Eileen. This her laughter at the end of that phrase feels a lot more out of place, considering she's trying to pose as a kind of savior or a caretaker. Yeah, she does the full-on evil laugh. So let's examine that lead elixir description. The items that she does reward the player with do match up with the NPCs we send to her. So like sending this suspicious man will give us like the pungent blood cocktails, which could suggest that he's like a drunk, even if it's on like blood. Sending the old lady to him will give us sedatives and things like that. And so the little girl we sent, Gascoigne's daughter, gives us lead elixir, which is a heavy, syrupy liquid medicine. Temporarily shifts weight to make a deflection of attacks easier, but must be used with care, as it also slows movement with no change to defense. Its recipe for this mysterious concoction is unknown, but some postulate that it materializes only when the most desperate nightmares. So, we will find this item again a little bit later near the front entrance of Yahar'gul, and a lot of people take the very last line about it only materializing in desperate nightmares to mean that the Yharnam that we're currently in right now is a nightmare. Unfortunately, that is what I would argue a true mistranslation, and that the Japanese uses nightmare as an adjective, so it's the most like nightmarish despair which produces the lead elixir. And I also think that aligns very much so with the character of the little girl who has lost both of her parents. She's distraught if she like comes to the conclusion that they must not be present if we're telling her to move to a different location. It could also tie into whatever the false Iosefka was trying to do to the child before her transformation. So just the idea of despair is goes pretty hand in hand with the little girl. And reading chat, there's dialogue for whacking the door, right? Yes, there is. Both the false Iosefka and the true Iosefka have some dialogue about it. The first Iosefka will like say that you're a beast, and they believe you've gone mad or blood drunk, which does tie into how hunters can go blood drunk over the night. Not important, but do you think the gain of insight could be telling that the hunter is suspecting her upon receiving the items? I think that interpretation is definitely available to be made. I don't really have concrete thoughts on the nature, like the ambient insight. I think it's supposed to highlight that something supernatural is going on. Whether or not that means like the whispers that come along with it is like, I don't know, the spirits of the dead trying to impart knowledge onto the player. But it is something that does need more explanation to kind of like fully flesh out the idea behind it. But I do think you could have a good point with like it could be an environmental hint to the hunter to like kind of pay more attention to what's going on. And you think it's because of her connection to the Great Ones, how she gets pregnant, and the Celestial Emissary experiments. Could you elaborate on that, Soda? I don't know if something got lost in the chat.
There may yet be humans out there. If you find them, send them to Iosefka's clinic. I endeavor to treat every survivor there is. So please, be a saint.
And that dialogue is pretty true to the original as well. We can go visit Gilbert as well, see if there's anything new he has to say, see if his illness is progressing anymore since having defeated the blood-starved beast. So after the blood moon, she's pregnant with a Great One, so she's obviously tied to the Great Ones in some capacity. I will talk about that more when we get to that phase of the night and get more of Arianna's quest uncovered in relation to that. Wenders thinks it's because of the umbilical cord, and Soda says, although I think it's more of an environmental hint than anything, I think it foreshadows the umbilical cord in her. Yeah, I can agree with that.
Don't you worry about me.
So he doesn't really have anything else to say. We're early on enough in the night that Patches hasn't come and replaced him. At least for the moment. I think I did forget to mention when Gilbert talked about it before, but he does have a line where he says that he's glad that he can at least die as a human. When we come back to this area later, we will find out, well, that might not be strictly true. But there is the possibility that like he could die and just kind of reanimate as a beast, which could lend support to the idea as to why so many coffins within Yharnam are locked to begin with. Gonna buy some more blood vials. And go back to the Cathedral Ward. Gilbert just sounds like he aged 50 years. You love the ambient coughing. Such a great attention to detail. Yeah, the voice actors in Bloodborne are fantastic in my opinion. Like, I don't really think anybody sounds out of place or it sounds unnatural. I mean, of course, like, there's more supernatural elements to it, but I think that just kind of lends to the ambience that they've got going on. You think that the beasts are undying? Yes, dark beasts are certainly referred to as undying. Within Japanese, there's a little bit of a like semantical barrier idea of death and immortality, because in English we have the words like immortal, undying, and undead, whereas in Japanese they're all the same word, so they don't necessarily have the distinction between something that is dead and come back to life versus something that cannot die versus something that's technically like never alive in like the textbook definition sense of the word, something that would be like immortal, like a god. Alright, so Soda has to go. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you get a chance to look over the VODs and enjoy the rest of the stream in your free time. So the reason why I'm coming back here right now is just because I forgot to loot the chest within this room right here. And I suppose I can like double check that madness to see if his loot is still dropped. So we get a blood tinged gemstone, which kind of does lend a credence to the workshops taking blood gems and putting them into their weapons. This gives us the twin bloodstone shards. I did forget to look at those, their description as well. Oh yeah. So, looking at the Bloodstone shard, we see just like a singular shard, and when we get the twin ones, we see very distinctly two of them together. Their descriptions are pretty much exactly the same, though, so it's not a real shame that I forgot to look at them earlier. Talk to the old lady again. And she's still pretty lucid as far as like her sanity goes. She's still very distrustful of the hunter, part of her like normal nature. And over the course of the night, like the idea of losing sanity from the NPCs will become more apparent. Oh. Guess the first guy could see me. That's a little bit unfortunate. So yeah, we've got the patrolling guys, and of course this time they are able to use their spells. Too slow. So one thing that is interesting to note about like their kind of cosmically arcane attacks is that they do resemble the cosmos in general. Like you get like star type effects coming out of them. This church servant right there, he wields the repeating pistol, which is a church firearm. It just kind of keeping that storytelling consistent between the factions of the game. I got stuck on it. So as we get into like the central part of Cathedral Ward, we do see more space open up. Like these little alleys are um, more like proper alleys. Like they don't really have a whole lot of clutter on them. The plaza takes up a lot of space, which does represent that this area has a lot of wealth, so to speak, because they can force away other people with what they've got going on right here. Like they have the luxury of owning enough land to have it be spacious, whereas like in the lower portion of the Cathedral Ward, it was all very cluttered and on top of each other. So the corpses over here give madman's knowledges. I don't know if anything like super crazy occurred over here to lend to the idea of there being like a supernatural phenomenon which would have like caused them to go mad. But they are all associated with the Healing Church, and we do know that they take a lot of interest in that kind of thing to begin with. And so killing the big church giant servants on occasion, they will drop these blue elixirs, which we have not gotten to see yet. And I do think they there is probably a connection between like the blue elixirs and the creation of these kind of mindless servants. The blue elixir is a dubious liquid used in strange experiments conducted by high ministers of the Healing Church. It becomes the brain. Hunters, able to retain consciousness by force of will, make use of secondary effect of the medicine which dilutes their presence while standing still. So this does say that like this is used for experiments, and because these giants drop it, it would make it fairly consistent for them to have been experimented on to create them. The one detail that doesn't get across very well in English compared to the Japanese is their force of will is related to the will in the blood echoes that I've been mentioning fairly consistently throughout this lore through. Going this way leads to the gate with the Hunter Chief emblem. To activate it, we would pull this lever. I will not do that because I'd like to save the insight to kind of show off the messengers that are surrounding it. And these church servants have flame sprayers, which lends the support like they will hunt beasts that are out in Cathedral Ward, although we don't really see many of those at all. And that, you know, flame is used for cleansing beasts. Now we go into another kind of residential district in the Cathedral Ward. The alleys become a little bit smaller. The houses are closer together and smaller as well. The lanterns do signify the houses having people inside them.
You're not from around here, are you? Well, an outsider who's come to join the hunt? What a pathetic idea. You what? What, you think I'm a beast? Well, maybe I think you're a beast. And step away from my castle.
Obviously, this man's dialogue is a bit off. This is what we call like either the suspicious man or like not like condescending, but like a contradictory man, something like that. He doesn't ever really believe anything the hunter player character will say to him. He tends to give advice which is the opposite of the truth, and he's very conceited in believing himself to be of higher intellect than the hunter and those around him.
Oh, enough of you. What, you think this is funny? Well, I certainly don't, so be gone with you. I'll have nothing to do with your beast stunts.
So he does berate the hunter for kind of going out and taking part in the hunt. He thinks it's silly. Like, he's kind of resigned to his fate, and very distrustful of others. So he's a Republican. I'm not going to give it like any political affiliations to the characters in this fictional world, but yeah, Rubito, it's the bigoted man. That's another name for him. I just couldn't recall.
Oh, enough with you already. Come on, just go, will you?
I do like his voice actor a lot. I think it does a really good job, like, characterizing him. He sounds pretty brief with his words, and so you can kind of get that like sense of like disdain and like exasperation that he's trying to give off.
Oh my, what a queer scent. But I'd take it over the stench of blood and beasts any day. What is it then? I'm off during hunts, so if that's what you're here for, I'll leave you to your own devices. If that doesn't do it, come back in the morning, darling.
So right now we're a little bit too early in the night cycle to be able to get these NPCs to move to safer locations. Arianna is the first NPC after like Gascoigne's daughter to remark about our scent, and she does distinguish it from the smell of blood and beasts. It'll get revealed a bit later on that it's like closer in nature to the moon. I believe the false Iosefka will say like moonlit scents, and Queen Annalise will also say like we are like a moon scented hunter. So this idea of the moon being associated with dreaming hunters in particular is lended support through this kind of interaction.
Oh, thank goodness. You're a hunter, right? Might you know of a safe place? The night is long, and I've very little of the incense left. Please, there must be some nice place to run off to.
Suppose I should insert my foot in my mouth. I guess if you unlock the gate first and then like don't kill Amelia or like the blood-starved beast, you can't allow them to move. So it must be like killing a boss, whether it be like the witches of Hemwick or something like that, will allow them to go to the other locations. So Arianna we can send to the chapel or the clinic. I will not send her to the clinic because it ends quest very abruptly, and she's got one of the largest roles in the significance of understanding like the lore and the mechanics of the game. So we're going to send her to the chapel.
Oh, thank you, darling. Maybe I'll see you there.
And then she's got like a little bit of that nervous laughter, which of course does sound very natural, but it can begin to show that like not everything is quite normal. It's very subtle storytelling.
Oh, thank you, darling. Maybe I'll see you there.
Wender says, Iosefka rewards you with numbing mist if you send Arianna to her. Yes. Because Cainhurst connections, I presume. Apparently she does the same with Adela. Do you think there's a reason for this? I don't know why she would give like numbing mist for Adela. It could just be something related to the nature of being a blood saint and something to do with like the quality of their blood. And so one thing that does also tie Arianna to the idea of Cainhurst, and I've talked about this briefly before, is to the side of her house we've got these little sigils, which is like one aspect of the Cainhurst sigil with the lion. And of course, like the other place where we find the sigil is very close to where we can get numbing mist, even though it's not like directly on it or related to that building. You appreciate that they changed their dialogue according to the PC hunter's gender. Yes, that's true. One of the unfortunate aspects of that is we did end up missing one of her gendered dialogues. In Japanese, she does say, like, to a male hunter that she sells her blood, and, like, rather than, like, do you hate, I can't remember the exact line, it's like, do you hate a whore, or something like that? I know it's, like, said a little bit more tastefully. Like, do you disdain a whore's blood? She does say to male characters, do you hate women who sell their blood? And to female, she mentions, like, do you disdain, like, whore's blood? So...
What's this two-bit nonsense you're peddling? I heard you told that wench about some shelter. Well, she's a damn fool to trust an outsider. Why? Well, her sort's probably just fixing to feed some of your coin.
So, this shows that the narrow-minded man, also called, is very suspicious of what we're doing. He eavesdrops on our conversation, so he was able to pick up that we told Arianna of a safe location, and that's like the two-bit peddling nonsense that we're doing in his mind.
Alright, what crafty lies does the outsider have today? You think I'm an easy mark? Yeah? Well, give me your best shot.
So, as I mentioned before, like, he's kind of like a contrarian. So if we tell him to go to the chapel, he will go to the clinic. And if we tell him to go to the clinic, he will go to the chapel. Just for the hell of it, I'm going to send him to the clinic this run. Just because I don't think it's something that's done super often for these kind of story run-throughs. And I don't really think there's like a ton of significance for his character beyond what we already have.
Too sharp for that bollocks. I know a superstition when I hear one. Outsiders. Even their lies are predictable.
He does not deserve to be saved in any way.
What? Still preying on folks with your book of lies? Yeah, fine. Come on, show me what you got. Tell me about your little safe place.
So you could revise what you've told him to send him to the other location as well, and just based on the last thing that you tell him, that will cause him to move to like the opposite location.
Yeah, sorry, too sharp for that bollocks. I know a superstition. Outsiders. Even their lies are predictable.
And of course he reinforces the idea that like outsiders are mistrusted by the people of Yharnam. He is similar to like the old lady in that regard. Before I forget, like there's just some more child-sized coffins throughout the Cathedral Ward. We get jump scared for not paying attention. I don't think these have like a ton of significance, but I do like the kind of imagery we get in this area. We get these statues. It could be Lawrence or just somebody else who's never really mentioned. And then we've got patrols. And I think this is like the first time we see different kind of like enemies working together like this. Like I know the guy that we just killed, I like the large hunter mob does appear like next to the gun wielders and the canals, but this makes them like look a lot closer together and like they're actually cooperating. And before I didn't have the binocular to kind of show it off, but now I think we can see a bit more clearly. Like these guys have horns, their entire bodies are covered in fur. They're a little bit closer to like what we'll find with like the beast possessed soul. So maybe the beast possessed soul is something a bit further along than these guys are. I think the beast possessed soul had like 3 toes, and I think this one has 4. So it just shows like he is a little bit like less regressed than the beast possessed soul. Looking at chat. Well, Gilbert did say Yharnamites have strange ways to treat guests. Yeah. So they are very consistent on like establishing the tone of the world.
Oh, we've the deepest gratitude for the church and all they do for us. The deepest, widest gratitude, yes. Yes.
And again, there is that kind of laughter to kind of punctuate what may have seemed like a very like genuine response to the hunter at first, but like the way that she repeats it, it makes it sound more sarcastic, and that she's trying to distance herself from the hunter in the church and just kind of wants to be left alone, and she's just trying to go along and keep her head down. And I do want to highlight, like, these NPCs still do have some of their sanity, although it is slipping. Like, we can hear this thumping noise coming from the NPC in this house.
Praise you. Praise the old damn church. And best of luck hunting. Best luck of all.
And of course, like, this man like hiccups in the middle of his dialogue there. It could be like showing that he's currently drunk. He's very sarcastic, kind of insulting the church in a roundabout way. Shows he does not have faith in them whatsoever. And the thumping that we hear going on could be like him literally pounding his head against the wall in a similar manner to Yamamura, who we can find in the DLC. And then we get a black church set from one of the corpses here, further reinforcing like the church's connections to Cathedral Ward. The Black Church Hunter hat is the attire of healing church hunters. Most healing church hunters are elementary doctors who understand the importance of early prevention of the scourge, achieved by disposing of victims, and even potential victims, before signs of sickness manifest themselves. Their black attire is synonymous with fear and that peculiar Yharnam madness. This set piece really does a interesting job of like setting up the role of the healing church hunters. Like, they're not necessarily only hunting beasts, but people whom they think are going to turn into beasts. Like, they don't have to have been fully transformed. And when taken in conjunction with the idea of the scourge and people like beginning to fail to identify humans as human because they're projecting their own beasthood onto them, really brings some sinister qualities to the operations of the church hunters. It could imply that the idea of killing men with the authority of the healing church is something that very likely happened, which could also play into why some of these NPCs here are distrustful of the church, or they're just trying to go along and keep their heads down so they don't get suspected themselves. And Wenders says, perhaps you answered this already, but do you think Adela could have been a hunter because she wears this set? If she wasn't so weak and so demure, I would think that, but just her nature in general gives me doubt about that. I think she was just a blood saint and wore the attire of the healing church, which isn't really like differentiated so much between like normal hunters and blood saints. It's just kind of like the white set, the black set, the executioner set, and like the choir and things like that. Going back to the black church set, there was something in the Japanese description for it, like the very last line about the peculiar Yharnam madness. If I remember correctly, it's about like the evening madness instead. Yes, the black attire is a thing of Yharnam's evening madness, and it just kind of I think the idea of it being an evening madness is to tie it to the idea of the moon coming out and like the sun going down and the whole night cycle as well. Yeah. Okay. Oh, and the gloves. The gloves are part of both the white and black sets. So, yeah. The surgical long gloves are white surgical gloves. The intricate embroidery weaves a spell that protects their wearer. The church engages in the hunt in a medical capacity. When a cancer is discovered, one must pinpoint its location, reach in, and wrench it from the host's bosom. I do like the description because it kind of almost like leads into that imagery of like a visceral attack. However, the Japanese dialogue or description does differ quite a bit from that. It says, hunts of the church are a kind of medical activity where direct contact and extraction are important. So, the Japanese makes it sound a lot more academic in nature, whereas I feel like the English, while I do really like it in terms of like the imagery it presents, it kind of strays from that particular reading. I guess the other ones aren't going to come at me so much. So up there is a bloodsucker, or not bloodsucker, a brain sucker. I'm a little bit surprised I was able to lock onto him from this location. Their placement in this area is curious because we don't really see beasts or anything here. They're kind of inactive, and we don't really have a whole lot of what looks to be experimentations going on within Cathedral Ward itself, which would lend to the explanation of why such different enemies appear here. And it's also curious because it doesn't targeted by everything that's patrolling the area, whether that's the church servants or these kind of militiamen and things like that. And some of these crates here could be like filled with blood vials. Of course, like this is all over the place in Yharnam. It's just kind of something I'm pointing out for now. Some of the imagery in Cathedral Ward, we've got these statues of like dogs and things coming off of buildings. They appear in Central Yharnam as well. So there's a lot more consistency between the Cathedral Ward imagery and what we find in Central Yharnam, as opposed to the kind of things that appear in Old Yharnam or Yahargul, for example. So we got like the griffin statues again. I think that's pretty much it. Like in this more crowded area, we get like signs of potential shops and more residential things. From this corpse, we get some poison knives, and I don't believe we've gotten any of those yet. Poison knives are knives slathered in poison. This curved knife is as thin and sharp as a surgeon's blade. It's often used for self-defense by special doctors in the healing church. They say that hunters traditionally avoid the use of poison, likely because the poison is too slow to act in the heat of the hunt. That's fairly true. Like, to get the best effects out of poison, you either have to like run and kite enemies for a while, or go into locations where they can't like counterattack you. So that does make sense in terms of like how hunters operate, as well as just the mechanics of combat in general. And of course, like throughout this area, there's tons of coffins. Just a gigantic repeating feature of Yharnam, pretty much no matter where you go. So this brings us up to like an upper area. We can see the plaza where the giants were from earlier. The one, like this gigantic statue is pretty much the same as the one that we find in the Tomb of Erden, which makes me wonder if, like before the Healing Church came, Yharnam, like the entire city was like, they were followers of the religion that had Erden as its deity, and whether or not this is a relic of that past, and whether or not the Healing Church has just appropriated and taken the buildings and repurposed them for their own designs. Because as far as the timeline goes, it's very unclear how much time elapsed from the founding of the Healing Church compared to our Night of the Hunts. And there is a lot of like contention between that, because how on earth could they have like built all of this yet we can still come into contact with like the founding members of the Healing Church, like Willem, Gehrman, and Lawrence's skull, and when we compare that to like how Mikolash has mummified remains and things like that later on. So this note is held by some more messengers, and it tells us that a watchman of Bergenworth guards the gate with a password, the secret adage of the Grand Cathedral. So I guess I'll go to that little gatekeeper that it's talking about, just to kind of like set up that if the hunter didn't know what they were doing, like where to go next on their quest, even though we've kind of been told to go to the Grand Cathedral. Like if we were exploring and we did like come up to the gates of the Forbidden Woods and wanted to go that way, just kind of what would greet us over there. Shining coins. This is where the brain sucker was and that little crow. Brain suckers and like a lot more of like the slug-like enemies tend to drop quicksilver bullets, which could show a potential connection between like mercury and things like that. So it's unclear if this is a chest or like a coffin, but I would say that this could also be like child size, and it's a little bit of a different model than like this one over here. Some more twin bloodstone shards. That might be enough for me to like upgrade the weapon finally. We can hear that kind of pounding going on again. I don't think there's like any enemies over there. It's probably just like some NPCs. Later on, like once we beat Amelia, we can find Alfred over here, pondering over like Bergenworth and things like that, and how to get to Cadenhurst. And these windmills are part of the Forbidden Woods, and we can go there later in the game. And like this is like a little tomb altar. Doesn't seem to have a ton of significance, but it does offer a very nice view of like the next area to go. The antidotes aren't terribly important, I don't think. There's like a whole lot of rationale for it to be along the way to the Forbidden Woods. I don't remember if there's like a whole lot of poisonous enemies down there. Maybe the snakes?
The password.
So since we don't know that adage that was mentioned in the note, we can only keep quiet.
The password.
So despite like it being the same words, his dialogue does change a bit more. He's got like a different kind of laugh, and it just kind of shows that whoever the password gatekeeper is a little bit unhinged himself. And then, like, once we reveal that the gatekeeper's been dead the entire time later on in the game, it really makes the character, like, question their sanity. Like, how could they have, like, heard all this if the man's been dead the entire time? And I think there's another item over here, yeah. Wenders brings up like the snakes in the the poisonous like cave area leading up to Iosefka's clinic. That would explain why antidotes would be a good spot or a good item to leave in that spot. I did get him. I don't think we can summon Henriette yet. Maybe we need to encounter Amelia first. I don't exactly know what triggers her sign to appear there. Did I already? Oh no, he must have moved. Yeah. Oh god. That's unfortunate. Well, at least we already cleared out that small area, and I'm just going towards like Amelia anyway. I need to open the gates. Oh, welcome to the stream, Zuhu. I hope you enjoy your stay here. Just kind of going over the lore of Bloodborne. So what could have happened in that graveyard that most of the bodies dropped Madman's knowledge? I did wonder about that. I don't necessarily think that there's like a specific event, like a supernatural event for them to like go mad and gain that knowledge, but it is interesting to think about, like perhaps it's just like where members of the church died, and since they're members of the church, they've already come into contact with enough things to allow them to have that kind of madman's knowledge. It could be potentially something like the healing church was farming, like for whatever reason Adela is also carrying a madman's knowledge and thinks it'll appease an upstanding member of the church. And so now that we've sent Arianna to the chapel, we can see her. She brought her own chair, which is nice, I suppose. And before I talk to her, let's see what the chapel dweller has to say.
There ain't a peep to be heard, not in the old town. I doubt there's any more out there. God save us. Yharnam's done for.
So now that I had sent the narrow-minded man to Iosefka's clinic, that's like all of the, let's say, like normal, sane NPCs that we could relocate to safe locations. There's another NPC out there as well, but he's more of a wolf in sheep's clothing, so to speak, in that he will kill the other NPCs that we've sent here as well. But the reason why he said that dialogue first is just because we've exhausted all the NPCs. So this is what he should say about Arianna.
There ain't no more survivors. Yharnam's done.
Is he not going to say anything? It's weird.
There ain't no more Yharnam.
Maybe I need to reload the area then.
Oh, hello, dear. You weren't lying. This is a safe place. Thank you. I'm in your debt. I'd like to tender my thanks, but I haven't much to offer. All I can give is my blood. But would you even take a whore's blood?
And so I've mentioned that specific line before in the Japanese where will you even take a whore's blood is instead do you dislike women who sell blood? And that is very significant when we compare her to Adela, whom we know will give away her blood for free. Can sell blood to people that's given away for free from others should indicate that hers is of a higher quality. It gives a better rush of life than what the Healing Church can offer, which may be why Adela is kind of peeking out over that that pillar over there, spying on us. Since I already have Adela's vial, I can't pick up Arianna's quite yet, because I've already received blood. So one way to highlight the kind of difference between Adela's blood and Arianna's blood is to take them and kind of contrast the effects that they give. So when we use Adela's blood, we get this like fiery aura around us for a little while. It'll continue to restore some of our HP or whatever it does, but that's it.
Oh, you. I'm sorry. Unless you've had a change of heart. Could come closer and knew you'd be back for more.
So we get the blood of Arianna. It's a bit loud for now, so I'm going to read it and then use the item and show off its effects. It's the blood taken from Arianna, Cathedral Ward, Woman of Pleasure. The sweet blood of Arianna restores HP and temporarily speeds stamina recovery. A member of the old healing church would know that her blood is similar indeed to precisely what was once forbidden. And this is supposed to be like a hint that the forbidden blood was like allegedly taken to Canehurst, and it's related to Canehurst and their vile blood, which the healing church kind of denounced and would go on to raid Canehurst with their executioners as a result of. So when we use her blood, we get that chiming effect. So compared to Adela's blood and even like Iosefka's blood vials, it gives a oral quality to it which we can hear. It's a kind of song in the blood, so to speak. This idea of like songs and bell-like chimes in relation to blood could give some more environmental clues as to why she could interact with Erden, who exists in voice and is the true essence of blood, or like blood is its true essence. There is that kind of extra connection between Arianna and Erden, which would suggest that's what allowed her to have the celestial infant with Erden as opposed to Adela, even though they both will have like the Erden Writhe runes if you kill them now. So Winters asks, isn't there something about one of the two blood being significantly more effective than the other? Yeah, I just talked about that right now. Did you like have a more specific question about that, or did I explain it while you typed that? Okay. Though you were also thinking about in-game effectiveness, like one of the blood and regenerating your health faster than the other. I don't really use them often enough to like know exactly how different they are in that regard. I know Arianna's does restore stamina, and I don't think Adela's does. I think Iosefka's continues to heal you. I think it is like in the item descriptions somewhat. Arianna's regen stamina, not health. Okay, yeah. Or stamina and health. Oh, stairs. Screw it. We've been through this area enough where I don't really need to deal with them. I'll explore a little this more in detail later. But these church servants over here have like these crucifixes which are covered with a red aura. When you're below 15 insight, that aura is gone. And so what I talked about in one of the previous streams with like the idea of what do you want to call it? The strung up corpses in old Yharnam, the shape of like hanged men and the hunter's rune in general. I think like just the shape of this like kind of crucifix in the shape of like a Y or an algae's rune could, oh wow, that was a terrible visual. The algae's rune could just be a symbol, like a carol rune that has like supernatural properties of itself. Because if they hit you with it, and I'll show this off later, you will get a very large influx of frenzy status. So it does show like there is a connection between like the supernatural and just like the crucifix, or perhaps just the shape in general. I don't think that they did anything to those crucifixes to make them like affected by that aura. And Zuhu asks, thoughts on the church giants? Are they from the chalices? We have talked about those before. I'm not 100% sure. They occasionally drop the blue elixirs, which state like those are like a product of healing church experiments. So I think there's a good case to make that like the church giants are something the healing church has either experimented on and produced themselves, or it's something they may have gone into Thumru and like figured out a way to pacify them, perhaps using the blue elixirs. Within the internal vial names, the church giants are called like flesh golems or like corpse Frankensteins. So it could be like they were trying to take a bunch of corpses and dead people and they came up with their own kind of like golems or Frankenstein's monster. I don't know if that idea is supposed to have like been preserved in the retail version of the game, but it might have just been like something that the developers were calling them just to, I don't know, make them distinct, if that makes sense. Coming down here, there is like two hunters, one with the tonitrus and the other with a rifle spear. Oh, and I aggroed them both, which is really bad. I got baited by the shiny items. I don't remember where their AI breaks off their aggro. I do know like the hunter NPCs in general can follow the player for a very, very long distance. Yeah. I might have goofed. Okay, this seems to be the limit. That was pretty bad of me, but I should have healed. Don't know why I didn't. Thought I would be able to interrupt his attack chain with my R1s. That obviously did not work out. The most well-balanced enemies in the game. If anything, like the most difficult enemy in the game is the player's own skill and greed. It always does kind of amuse me just like how effective just running past everything in the game is. Like, it really trivializes a lot of the encounters, like once you like get comfortable with enemy placements and things like that, where you can just literally run past everything and not take any damage. So that takes care of the Tonitrus Hunter. I don't know how well you could see it, but he's wearing like part of the Yahar'gul garb. Definitely has the helmet and like the wooden shield, which is not very effective for PvP, but he was using it regardless. The Rifle Spear Hunter is harder to deal with because he's more able to interrupt the player's movements with his weapons. But on the other hand, he doesn't have the bolts type damage to like really mess with like a lot of players who might not be equipped with bolt resistant gear. So they each have their own set of challenges. Of course, like, since he's an NPC hunter, he has the advantage of like having unlimited bullets, which is annoying to deal with. So he's like, I should have counted how many times he was shooting, but it's way beyond 20 at this point. And since he relies on the gun, it's pretty hard to visceral him, since he doesn't use his weapon for a lot of attack animations. There we go. Oh shit. Did that literally say 0 when I visceraled him? Whatever. So I get back some of those Quicksilver bullets, which I've wasted so many of. And time to look at the chat. Wender says he's pissed at the rifle spear guy, so he take revenge on his mate by shooting him endlessly. Pretty much, yeah. He inspired people in PvP by shooting forever with his rifled spear, which apparently was broken when you add elemental damage to the bullets. I think in like the very first patch of the game, like or the day one non-patched version of the game, each individual bullet you could augment like its damage, so you could do obscene amounts of damage just like with the blunderbuss. I don't know the specifics for how that worked, though.
Bless us with blood. Bless us with blood.
So we've got like a kind of pseudo prayer going on in these houses.
Bless us with blood. Bless us with blood.
The Japanese for that is extremely similar. It's just like the blessing of blood, not necessarily bless them with blood. And coming up this little cliff, we've got another snatcher. Oh shit. Oh, I should get behind him. We get some more twin bloodstone shards. Definitely have enough to level up right now. Do I need to? Yeah, I do think I need to drop down from there to just make things a bit easier. So yeah, when you're on this cliff, you can kind of jump ahead to attack or get into a position where you can attack these kind of snipers that are going to be down here, and you can't really deal with them if you go like through the like little tunnel over there. Some more quicksilver bullets, and so we've got like two executioner dissectors over here. Again, they're not really affiliated with the faction of the executioners. It's a little bit of a mistranslation for that enemy. And so the rally mechanic really does become a boon when you're like getting hit by an attack and creating the opportunity for a visceral, because you'll just regain all of that HP. Oh no. And then there's like two scurrying wandering madnesses that are really easy to miss due to these executioners. I believe just reloading the game allows them to spawn in. Totally the wrong option. Winders asks, do I think the butchers / executioners could have some affiliation with Yharnam, seeing that some guard the gate to the unseen village or are close to where the witches of Hemwick, who have peers in Yharnam, are? I do think there could be some affiliation. I mean, they do have affiliations with the church in general, so Mensis is one of like the higher echelons of that church, so they might be able to dispatch these kind of figures into the places that they need. But I don't necessarily think like they're the same as kidnappers. Some more twin bloodstone shards. Definitely enough to upgrade the weapon by now. And so I mentioned this earlier in the stream where we can find the first like case of the lead elixirs available to the player without like sending any of the NPCs to the clinic. This is going to be the entrance to Yharnam that we can approach later after we kill Ram. There is an amygdala which is kind of guarding the entrance, or it's just chilling out by the entrance. If we have the tonsil stone, it can transport us to a different location into the lecture hall within the nightmare. I don't have that item yet. I'm just kind of showing off what's in the immediate area surrounding like the Grand Cathedral up there. So I mentioned way earlier in, I think it was the last stream, with the church workshop and being able to look at the different areas from like the different sections of the map and see like how they're a little bit different. Like there was a scaffolding up here which we can't see where like the well was, and if we go to like down here we can see a river right next to the Grand Cathedral, and it does lead down to Old Yharnam, and it does go towards like the Church of the Good Chalice. It leads right next to it. So like within the research hall DLC, they've got like poisonous water that they've potentially been like experimenting with within like the Grand Cathedral itself. And so if what is shown in the research hall DLC is like what do you want to what's the word, analogous to what we can find in the waking world, if the healing church did conduct experiments with the waters and stuff like that, and they did end up like dumping it, the runoff from the Cathedral Ward would go down to Old Yharnam, and it could potentially have like been responsible for so many people contracting the ashen blood in that location. But that's just kind of a little bit of conjecture about that relationship, but I think it's possible and worth considering. Like the healing church didn't necessarily have to be malicious in that intent and like try to do it in a way to spread their blood healing. It could have just all been an accident or something they weren't aware of. And yeah, so Wenders does point out you can see the amygdala over by the Yahargul Chapel with 40 insight, which we're a little bit away from right now. Like in the inventory, we probably get a decent bit closer to it. So 16, and I have what, 17 right now. So yeah, just a little bit shy. Right now I'm gonna, should I head to the dream or? Yeah, let's go through Hemwick first. We could confront Amelia now, but I don't like to fight Amelia before dealing with the Witch of Hemwick. Not because like Amelia is super strong, which she can be, like depending on like what weapon you're using. Like the cane isn't very effective against her, but I like to deal with the Witch of Hemwick first, just to get like the Rune workshop tool. I just like the effects that it provides. So on the corpse, before the stairs, we found the bloodshot eyeball, and this does relate to like going towards Hemwick. We find like a lot of eye collectors. Well, not in the town itself, but just the idea of the Witch of Hemwick collecting eyes and being covered in eyes. Like this does lead into that kind of thematic connection. The bloodshot eyeball is a material used in the Holy Chalice rituals. It's an exquisite eyeball removed quickly after death, or perhaps even before, used to unlock the seal of the old labyrinth hintertombs. So that does set it up as like a kind of material they would use to access different areas of the Thumerian ruins. One small nice like detail that's been pointed out is like this little wooden panel does say Hemwick on it. Might be a little bit hard to read, but yeah, like W-I-C-K, Hemwick. And this little tunnel leads to like a graveyard area, which can be a little bit hard to deal with at times. Wonders asks, what would the reason be why the Mad Ones of Hemwick, for whatever they're called, spawn around Hemwick when you kill Amelia and trigger the following phase of the night? I'm not entirely sure. I think it could be tied to just like potentially the moon presence and the blood moon becoming bigger and getting closer, and that like it of course is being concealed to us by Rom. But that's just kind of like a rationalization. I don't think there's a good idea, or like a good explanation for why it happens that way. This area can be a bit hard to deal with because there's a lot of the Yharnamites who hold guns, and the dogs, which are very agile and can very easily flank the player. So normally I'd like to examine like the enemies, the new enemies when we get to them, but just for like the sake of my own safety and hopefully not dying on stream and like having to spend the time to run back and collect everything, trying to take care of it now. Oh shit, foot in my mouth, huh? I think next time I'll just like run through, try to grab my echoes and get the lantern in the next area and then just kind of deal with it since it's so much closer. So to go back to the idea of like those mad ones, which we haven't seen yet, that Wenders has brought up, is one potential idea I have in like relation to them could be like when characters like Gascoigne suddenly transform, maybe there's a connection between like whatever causes the mad ones to appear that could potentially be within men and related to people transforming into beasts in general. Obviously, like, there's no concrete connections to that, but it's just something I've idly wondered. Like, the mad ones certainly aren't related to beasthood. They're more related to insight, as like the Witch of Hemwick fight will reveal, because if you do encounter her fight without any insight, those enemies will not spawn. So it's something like kind of internal within the hunter and with how the insight mechanic works, but it's never really clear. That's going to be annoying. So we get some bone marrow ash, which does tie to Hemwick. We've already looked at that description before. Quicksilver bullets from all these hunters, or like Yharnamites with the guns. And if this were the night cycle and Wenders had kind of brought it up, there will be some like additional enemies that will literally spawn out of the ground, like out of clouds of black smoke. They're called mad ones. But since we haven't killed Amelia yet and it's not fully night, they do not spawn. So now's as good an opportunity as any to like examine those kind of dogs that were chasing us. Like a lot of people might not be able to tell without like a close look, but they are like the spikes and things that are on the dogs are strapped to them by the people of Hemwick. So they've got like these big old blades in their mouths that they're kind of like put there by the people of Hemwick, or like the huntsman over there. They've even got like these interesting looking claws put onto them. I know one of the more interesting aspects of the dog lore in general to me is they're rabid, and like the whole idea of rabidness and frenzy is connected. So it does call into question whether the dogs are given the blood as well, and if beasthood is inherent within men, like how does that dogs? Of course, we get like crows and things like that to compare it to, but the people of Yharnam could be feeding blood to the dogs, or it could just be a product of the dogs biting enough beasts, or like enough people have been transformed to become like blood drunk themselves and begin to transform. And that does also tie into like some of the Chalice dungeon enemies. Like they have like much larger dogs that are very difficult to deal with. They've got like dark red eyes and horns as well. So beasthood does seem to affect dogs as well. So like whatever is in the blood to like draw out the kind of transformation, it's similar, yet it does seem to differ slightly from what's in humans. Wender says, if he remembers correctly, the Mad Ones trigger a visual effect similar to a summoned hunter when they spawn, so yes, insight and internal things could be related. Yeah, they do kind of like resemble like messengers, like the little clouds of smoke that appear. I think that's pretty much it for this like little graveyard connecting area. I don't believe there's like a ton of lore here specifically, other than like the Charnel lane cremates people and like takes bones to do it. The only other like small thing is like from this area you can still kind of see towards Cathedral Ward, and like I think that's just a rock. Maybe you can't see it very well. Like this is like the kind of border of Yharnam into a kind of potentially different township, which will get a bit more relevant whether or not like Hemwick is part of Canehurst or Yharnam, and where the borders of each like city or authority lies. Wenders asks, by the way, do you have an idea about the meaning of the name Hemwick Charnel Lane? Outskirt is part of the meaning, or so I heard. I don't know about Hemwick specifically, but Charnel Lane is like a charnel house. It's related to cremation, which kind of ties back into the bone marrow ash which gets produced there.
Welcome home, good. What is it? Farewell, good. May you...
I'm gonna upgrade my weapon first before talking to her to see how much leveling will increase the damage that I'm able to do.
Welcome. What is... Very well.
So only like 2 more additional points of damage. I think at this point I'll go for a little bit more vitality. Oh, I can level up. Yeah, that should be good enough, I suppose. Once we get like the Carol Rune Workshop tool, it'll
Farewell,
be...
good hunter.
we could like augment our stats as well, so I don't need like a whole lot more damage at this point. Or like rather, I won't get a ton more damage until I'm able to upgrade the weapon. Alright, Wenders, you have to go. Thanks for dropping in again and asking questions. I enjoyed having you. Have a good one. So this is Hemwick Charnel Lane. It's one of the first areas that developed. There's like a little road going off to the side that like the player can never access. It may have led back up to the abode of the witch, which we'll get to at the end of this level. And as we go into the town proper, we kind of finally see the first signs of women just kind of out, not necessarily on the hunt, but just out in the open in general. So we see them dancing as though they've already gone mad, and so they're not like transformed in like the traditional sense of like becoming more bestial in nature. Like they're not covered with fur, their left arms aren't long like the traditional Yharnam hunter minion that we've seen time and time again. So one's like carrying a sickle. This one has like a butcher's cleaver and a torch. And they've got like this red cloak on, which might tie into ties with like the healing church or a potential NPC like we can see the portrait of in Canehurst. Although I kind of doubt it. And like this woman's carrying like a firebrand of some sort. I don't know exactly what it was, but examining some of the more environmental details, we get a guillotine for the first time in the game. Like this is not a very common sign in Yharnam at all. We get like a stretcher kind of wheelbarrow, so it shows that they're like transporting either wounded people, which I don't find to be likely, or like corpses, potentially for like use in their cremation. And from this corpse we get the bloodshot eyeball, which lends credence to like them collecting eyes for this area. This statue resembles the women that we see in this area, and like the item that they're using that like is covered with fire. I still don't know exactly what it is. I mean, I could probably easily find it out. I've just never gone through the effort of it. And an NPC we can interact with.
Do you hear the graveyard murmurs? Then it's almost time. Oh, I can't wait. I just can't wait.
Some totally normal human type laughter at the end there.
Do you hear the grave then it's almost...
It's never really explained what those graveyard murmurs are. One of my thoughts could be like, if she's insightful enough or going mad, she might be able to hear Murgo's cries somewhat, or it could just be like the idea of like how we hear like this weird whispering whenever we use a madman's knowledge to gain insight, or like the ambient insight from accessing a new area. I do like how right next to this house or residence there's a bunch of suspended bodies. I mean, I don't like literally like that, it's just in terms of like storytelling that it's kind of something you don't really see so much throughout like the rest of Yharnam, like where it's all concentrated in one spot. There seems to be like a purpose behind it, even if we don't exactly know what that macabre purpose is. So one of the voice lines for like the female characters is, "It's all your fault," which does continue to build that like a sense that like the Yharnamites are deeply mistrustful of foreigners, or if not foreigners, just like hunters in general. And one of the other women was carrying a large mallet, like Eustace from like Courage the Cowardly Dog. It's a very uncommon weapon, and I'm not entirely sure like what they were using it for with their graveyard rituals and things like that. And some of these women throw Molotov cocktails, which just reinforces the theme of Hemwick, Charnel Lane, and fire in general. This gate is locked, can't be opened from this side. And looking back out over Hemwick, we can see in the distance the astral clock tower of what you want to call it, Yharnam, the Healing Church, Grand Cathedral, and then the orphanage over there, although we don't really see smoke coming out of its stacks. In this area we've got a bunch of crows, and we've got like the one non-hostile crow in the game in this area. Well, it's most likely due to like a programming bug or an error rather than anything that's significant to the lore of the game. I mean, Snuggly or any of the crows from the Dark Souls series, but yeah, it's non-aggressive even if you hit it. This unlocks a shortcut to that one building with the woman who talks about the graveyard murmurs. And if this were the full night cycle, a mad one would appear from the ground right here and attack us. Some more bone marrow ash. And this is like a really weird aspect of Hemwick. I think they just like overlooked maybe assets not being rendered properly. It almost seems like we're suspended in like what we could find in like the Nightmare Frontier. I think that is supposed to represent like the river that we see going like next to the Grand Cathedral and into Old Yharnam, but it's just pretty well unfinished, unfortunately. So this area that we're going into right now is a stable, like where they keep horses, and so we can see some of their carcasses as we enter. We've got stalls, which some of these ladies will be hiding out in. And some jump scares. We can hear the wheels of a wheelchair turning around. And of course, like, what stable would be complete without some hay and haystacks? Oh, okay. We get some more bloodshot eyeballs. And like if we examine some of the tools around here, it's pretty basic stuff like bowls, cups, flasks, urns, and books. Not very sophisticated at all, which does help characterize like Hemwick as being out on the more rural portion of Yharnam, and less advanced in terms of culture and civilization and wealth. That blood gemstone, we see a pitchfork, really reinforcing the agrarian kind of setting we're in. And just some more urns. Just a random man's knowledge off a skull, or a corpse like practically falling out of a window. Must have had a bad day. And then, like leading out of the stables, we can see the castle Cainhurst in the background. The bridge that would have connected Cainhurst to Hemwick is broken down in several locations, possibly as a result of the raid onto Cainhurst, although they could have fallen into disrepair after the massacre of the castle. It's not explained. I don't think there's anything over here. Yeah. And this is the giant lake, which is also why I believe like that area with the lack of assets earlier was part of a river. So coming out, we seem to be like in a slightly more residential area of Hemwick, although there's no way to really access these buildings because, you know, how the architecture really makes a whole lot of sense in these FromSoft games. We've got just a whole bunch of like graves haphazardly strewn about again, literally like clumped and just clustered all over each other. It doesn't really make any sense. One of the things about like these graves, they're similar to the ones in the first part of the area with like the connecting part between Yharnam itself and Hemwick, is like you got the floral imagery beginning to appear on these tombstones. And it could connect to the idea of like the flowers which are in the hunter's dream. Although there's not a whole lot to connect that idea, it's just something that I find possible. Oh shit. Didn't mean to fall down. So in this area we've got some patrolling executioners as well, or I guess I'll just call them butchers from now on, just to draw like a bit of the differences between like Alfred brand of executioner and these guys. So this like little tower is where you're supposed to naturally progress through Hemwick, and you get like jump scared by this little lady chilling in the corner. So I fell off like right over there, and everything is in poor repair. Like the floor is falling out. It almost looks like there's smoke. Like there's just bodies strewn about everywhere, suspended from the ceiling, piled up all over each other on the corners of the place. The smoke almost seems as though like this place was recently on fire. Hopefully it's just like smoke and not just like the bugs and things coming off of these corpses. This obelisk thing represents like the crossing of Hemwick, and it'll become more relevant later if we want to get to Cainhurst. There's not a whole lot that I can say about like the imagery that's on it itself. So one thing that those dogs can do is they can like rear up on their hind legs and attack with their forefeet, which is not like normal behavior of like a regular dog. So perhaps like there is something within the blood which makes them strong, like smarter or a little bit more aggressive in that regard, being able to make use of those like metal claws that the folk in this area have attached to them. And so this is where the bridge would have connected to Hemwick, most likely. We don't really get other spots. There's no like straight location to have made it like work. So it probably would have like curved around this like little cliffside area to get to Cainhurst. And being careful not to fall off here. You can loot this body for the lake rune, which has a lot of, well, maybe not like a lot, but it has some significant discrepancies in the Japanese text. So lake is another Carol rune that transcribes inhuman sounds, and this transcription of the Great One's inhuman voices ripples like a watery reflection. This rune means lake, and those who memorize it enjoy reduced physical damage. Great volumes of water serve as a bulwark guarding sleep and an augur of the eldritch truth. Overcome this hindrance and seek what is yours. I really dislike this description for a number of reasons. Like one of the things that does bother me about it is capitalizing the T in eldritch truth, but that's because this phrase in and of itself, eldritch truth, is the same phrase that's used to describe the arcane stat, which I've talked about before. So it's saying in order to reach into the arcane, like the way that people access spells in this universe, you must first go through barriers of water which protect sleep. So the basic metaphor would be like if dreams are an afterlife and the arcane is associated with like messengers and spirits of the dead and all that, water is like the first between the dream and reality, which is kind of a bit hard to understand even on its own and like looking at the lore. So like the whole concept of like fluids being related to the dream, I think is supposed to be represented with the lake rune. If we look at like fluids in general, the as like layering them on top of each other, blood is said to be thicker than water and it would sink to the bottom of water. quicksilver and mercury is heavier than blood and would sink to the bottom between like the layers of water and blood. So if quicksilver is like related to phantasms and things like that, it's closest to that. It would explain like why there's a connection between the slugs and quicksilver, and then the next step from quicksilver would be blood. So if we take like say like the waking world is above water or whatever, it seems as though like the nightmares and the dreams and the afterlife would be below the surface of the water, and that's why like this lake rune and things like that serve as the bulwark between dimensions, so to speak. There might have been something else with that. Let me remember. I kind of went off on a tangent. Oh yeah, so to overcome this hindrance and seek what is yours. That's what I was talking about. Like in Japanese, it's like those who are in search of it, like that being the arcane, or must go beyond the surface of water in order to obtain it. So that's where I'm pulling that interpretation from. And when this phrase like Eldritch Truth is just left as it is, it makes it sound a lot more abstract, and that is not trying to talk about a specific function of the Bloodborne universe, in my opinion. That's kind of like my biggest disagreement with the way that it's written. It's been unfortunate. I'm just not getting lucky with these hits. So, I've talked about the idea of the hanged man before, and one of the reasons why I believe like the idea of hanged man is related to the hunter's rune and things like that is due to some of the corpses that we can find within the Hemwick Charnel lane. So this corpse right here in particular, the way that it's hung up, it's got like its arm sticking out in a P shape. We can see this kind of shape on one of the altars, or not altars, but the tombs in the hunter's dream. What looks to be like a kind of proto shape of the hunter's rune, the hunter's mark. Now I'll show that off once we get back in there. Or like the shape of this corpse in particular really highlights that. So this is the witch's abode. This will be where we fight the Witch of Hemwick, one of the easiest bosses in the game. And when we go inside, we see like a whole bunch of corpses and beds, potentially like in a kind of infirmary. One thing that fascinates me about that is like this corpse is literally tied and chained down to the bed. So it could have shown like they were experimenting on these people at some point, and they kind of stopped at some point throughout that process. We get some more Madman's knowledge. And when we enter the boss arena, we should get some more ambient insight as well. So despite having just killed that witch, there's another one which will appear. Makes it seem as though there's more than one witch of Hemwick. I looked at the supplementary materials in Japanese, and it does say that, yeah, it is only one crazy witch in here. The way that like the boss name works out in Japanese normally would make it more ambiguous. So it would just read like Witch of Hemwick, not the Witch of Hemwick. And so like the things that are attacking me right now, these are the mad ones that we were talking about, being able to appear throughout the town of Hemwick. They can kind of interrupt the fight a little bit, but they're not too terrible. One of the annoying, parts of the fight is how the witches can like disappear and you have to kind of search for them again. And then they can stun you with their their spells, like they just got me with twice. And so, like, if the mad ones came in and hit me also while like she's in the middle of this, it could potentially kill me. But I mean, like, all things considered, like, once you know the mechanics of this fight, it's really trivial. Killing the witches causes the mad ones to despawn immediately. And as I said before, if you do encounter this boss without any insight, the mad ones won't spawn at all, making it even more trivial. Defeating the witches, they dropped the bloodshot eyeball, I believe. And like the real prize after defeating the boss in here is coming to this back room and finding a corpse with the Rune workshop tool on it. So one of the interesting aspects about this corpse right here is it's got like more defined hunter attire, and that it's kind of looked like it's been deliberately left in here. One thought behind its placement is like in earlier points of the game, like Hemwick was supposed to line up back with the Nightmare Frontier, and that's how you're supposed to access it. So it is a possibility that this corpse of a hunter was at one point like the access to the Nightmare Frontier, and perhaps like touching its corpse would transport you into that location, like we used to access the lecture hall through the corpse of Mikolash. When we examine the arena where we fought the Witch of Hemwick, it's much more reminiscent of a church. It's got like that kind of wide open area. This like little circle, which we'll kind of see in the other churches as well. And this motif of a woman over a corpse, which is pretty well representative of Lawrence and his death or apotheosis in the Healing Church, which does make this seem more like a church. In one of the Project Beast trailers, we can see Amelia in this area, and like that altar's behind her, so there probably was more of a church-based connection in earlier drafts of the game. When we go look at the walls, we see a bunch of the corpses stacked up again. Some of them aren't fully wrapped, like this one right here. There's beds lining the wall, which might like tie into the whole like research hall imagery in the DLC. But despite this place being called the Charnel Lane, we don't really see a whole lot of evidence of like cremation in this specific area. It could be possible that like they would first like collect and possibly treat the corpses here in the town of Hemwick, and then send them to the orphanage. And that could be why there's so many smokestacks billowing throughout the night. but those are all just kind of like educated guesses as to how that all works together. And of course, like, there's a bunch of corpses suspended from the ceiling, just kind of reinforcing the idea of hanged men throughout Hemwick. Alright, we did get the Rune workshop tool, and I will highlight something about that description, but I just kind of want to show off this little dialogue right here. Memorize a Carol rune to acquire its eldritch strength. So this word right here, eldritch, it stems from shinpi in Japanese, which means like arcane or mystic or whatever. But I'm just gonna like highlight that it's eldritch strength in this context compared to like what the Rune Workshop tool itself says. Where's okay. The Rune Workshop tool is a runesmith, or was a tool of runesmith Carol. Let me just restart. Runesmith Carol, student of Bergenworth, transcribed the inhuman utterings of the Great Ones into what are now called Carol runes. The hunter who retrieves this workshop tool can etch Carol runes into the mind to attain their. Provost William would have been proud of Carol's runes, as they do not rely upon blood in any measure. So, just to highlight the whole thing about eldritch strength, in this context it's called wondrous strength. They both come from the term shinpi, which, as I had mentioned, is what they used for the arcane stat. And so I would argue it should be read that the Rune Workshop tool gives the hunter arcane strength, and that this is a really large theme throughout the game that's just a little bit been decentralized because of the localization of this term. The last part of this description also varies or differs very greatly in Japanese. Rather than saying Willem would have been proud of Carol's runes, as they do not rely upon blood in any measure. The Japanese says that, like, hold on one second, that not relying upon blood is something that is close to Headmaster Willem's ideals. So, in English, it makes it sound as though Willem would have never met Carol, whereas in the Japanese version of this text, it's more ambiguous. Willem could have known of Carol, he could have been familiar with the workshop, or with the Carol runes, and he could have preferred those because they didn't rely on blood, and it was closer to his idea of like understanding the world through knowledge and insight. Now, just examining the icon for this as well, we get the hunter's mark in what looks to be like a brand, like going into like a little like a toolbox chest or something like that. So obviously this isn't an item that has like a whole bunch of like real world equivalences compared to like the Blood Gem Workshop tool, which kind of almost looks like a trepanation device, which is like used to like bore holes into things or like to screw things down. So the Rune Workshop tool is a bit more fantastical in nature. The idea would be like the hunters literally branding like the shapes of these Carol runes into their mind. And one thing that this does bring into question is whether or not the Carol runes can be used in the real world, or whether or not the only way that one can access their power is to either like be exposed to something and gain it that way, like in the waking world, or to be able to alter an aspect of themselves due to the dream itself. So this memory altar does allow us to do that. One thing to mention about this, like this little blue icon is more like a covenant rune. Those aren't really explained very well, but they're like oath runes you kind of swear an oath to use them, and they represent like more factional influences as opposed to the other memory slots. Yeah, even this says like oath memory at the top left underneath Carol runes. I don't use thrust a whole lot, so I won't worry about that.
Welcome home, good hunter. What is it you desire? Very well. Let me...
Yeah, only 1 point of damage with that. It's a bit unfortunate. Yeah, let's just go with it.
Over time, countless hunters have visited the great...
I don't think Gehrman will be in the back, but he might be. So let's check. Oh, he is.
Oh, Lawrence, what's taking you so long? I've grown too old for this. Of little use now, I'm afraid.
So we do catch Gehrman asleep in the dream, which is a bit questionable how that works out. Like, if you're in a dream, shouldn't you already be asleep? How is it possible that Gehrman and the doll are sleeping? This could lead support to the idea that their physical bodies are in this dream, or at least Gehrman's is. I mean, the doll, we can find the abandoned version.
Oh, Lawrence, what's taking you so long? I've grown too old for this. Of little use now, I'm afraid.
So as we find out, Gehrman does have a connection to Lawrence, the founder of the Healing Church. At this point, it's not very clear what that is, and he implores him for... well, I guess he's not asking for help right now. He's just saying, like, his role
Lawrence,
is pretty much over.
I've grown too old.
He doesn't think he'll be of use any longer. And I've never talked to the stump messengers in this playthrough. You can just equip them with like the cosmetic items. So like now, giving them like one of the messenger items, they will wear them. I did forget to mention in the other stream after we got like the doll blood gem like from her tear stone, that one of the reasons why silver is significant is if you're heartless or you kind of make a mistake and hit the doll, she will bleed a kind of silvery color, which a lot of people have taken to mean that it's like the idea of pale blood, that the doll would have it. But pale blood should be understood as a reference to the moon presence. And if you kill the doll, you can still channel your blood echoes, and there's no like real consequences for that. If you come back later, she'll be back in the dream in her position as though nothing ever happened, and she won't have remembered it either. So having defeated the witches of Hemwick, we can go back to the Cathedral Ward and talk to some of the NPCs to see how they're doing with their mental conditions. Insert comment about Gehrman being a proof here. Yeah, Rubito is completely correct with that. Like, a lot of people will make some pretty lewd accusations about the nature of that silvery substance within the doll. But I think it's probably more tied to like her having absorbed the blood echoes of hunters innumerable. So that's kind of like where that silver color might come from. It's never explained, and as the description does state, like the doll should have neither blood nor tears, so its nature is a bit of an enigma.
Oh, hello. The whole town's turned, has it? Quite a big family now, aren't we? Though I'm afraid I seem to be the black sheep. Back for my blood, I presume. Oh, good. Come close, dear. I knew you'd be back for more.
So we can see Adela peeking out over at us. We get a bit closer. I guess she wasn't really paying too much attention this time. It's not that big a deal.
Oh, brave hunter. Thank the gods you're safe. Do you wish to be treated with blood? Or am I unworthy of your attention?
So that does kind of reveal part of Adela's character is feeling like inferior and jealous of the hunter talking to Arianna.
Have you renewed thought? Forgive me, I should have known better. What would a brave hunter do with lowly blood like mine? Please, forget I even asked.
And so that kind of cements her inferiority complex. It really shows like how harshly she thinks of herself in relation to the hunter and Arianna. Oops.
You! Stay away from me!
Old lady keeps saying her same lines.
There ain't no more survivors. There can't be. Yharnam's done for.
The Chapel Dweller is still crestfallen.
Praise you. Praise the old damn church.
And so the NPCs around here are still fairly normal. But once we kill to go crazy and begin moaning and things like that instead. So right now we're going to head back towards Amelia and take care of that to kind of highlight this. I think Gilbert might appear now if we talk to like Gilbert. Although I suppose, or did I say Gilbert? I meant Patches. Patches might appear now if we talk to Gilbert. But that might also happen after like Amelia. I think there's a note out here that I forget about. I don't remember. No, maybe that's the one inside. So before going into the cathedral itself, when we look at the door, there's some pretty interesting like guardian-esque statues. We've got these malformed creatures holding torches. Later on we'll discover that these are the amygdala, and one part about this statue which differs from like the normal variant of the amygdala we'll find later is they only have 2 arms, and they do seem to be a little bit more humanoid. So it might represent a kind of like transformation before they get to their final stage. And of course, like the statues leading up to the cathedral are all what we've seen already going through central Yharnam and up. On the door itself, we've got these interesting figures that look like they have like tiny little hands. I think they could potentially represent like the umbilical cords, but it's a little bit hard to make out, and we'll see like bigger depictions of them later on in the game to kind of like make that comparison a bit clearer. So once we've entered the Grand Cathedral, we've got larger statues of the amygdala. I'm not sure what they're carrying. It almost looks like harpoons. And there is a note somewhere in here, I know. Yeah, okay, here it is. And this note is not held up by messengers, and it can be kind of easy to miss with the lighting. So, heir to the ritual of blood, purveyor of administration. Place your hand in the altar's sacred covering and inscribe Master Lawrence's adage upon your flesh. So this is relating back to the note that we found much earlier in the stream, like on the rooftop way like down there, talking about the adage to the gatekeeper and the forbidden woods. So in order to get this adage, this note is telling us we must put our hand onto the altar sacred covering, and that'll be a bit more relevant later. And like leading up to the steps towards Amelia, it looks like there's blood splattered, and it's unclear like how this came to be.
Let us partake in communion and feast upon the old blood. Our thirst for blood satiates us, soothes our fears. Seek the old blood. But beware, the frailty of men. Their wills are weak, minds young. The foul beasts will dangle nectar and lure the meek into the depths. Remain wary of the frailty of men. Their wills are weak, minds young. Were it not for fear, death would go unlamented.
So that final line about like fear going unlamented ties back into one of the concepts I brought up with like Eileen, and the idea of fear and it being a tool that they can use to keep humans distinct from the beasts, and which is completely contradicted with like the descriptions of the Molotov cocktail and the torches. Like beasts still have fear, so like this idea of fear being necessary to keep beasthood back just does not truly pan out. And so it does show that the characters within the game have a flawed understanding of their own universe. And it's important to note like one of the more dangerous aspects of the beasthood, according to Amelia's prayer, is like the beast will dangle nectar to the meek, and so like being meek and having a weak will is what tends to cause people to kind of succumb to the beasthood within and to become attracted to the lure of the beasts and their honeyed words, which might tie into why in the opening cutscene it looks like the beast that comes out of the pool of blood like is beckoning towards the hunter with its outreached claw. So Amelia has a pretty abhorrent transformation, yet she still clutches on to the pendant which she was holding while she was a human that represents like some of her devotion to her faith. Her appearance is a lot different than that of like the cleric beasts. It's thinner, the face seems to be a bit more canine and lupine in nature. Her horns aren't necessarily like that of like deer antlers, or like a moose antlers, but they are more like a deer antlers or like a gazelle's. One idea that I have like potentially behind that could be that Amelia's transformation might be closer to that of like a Kirin. In Japanese culture, it's like a kind of like a cross between like a giraffe and a dragon almost. So since Kirin are like the mythological beasts that are associated with like good fortune and pious divinity, Amelia's transformation might be representative of like a bastardization of that concept. Oh no, I missed my visceral. Damn it. Oh, that was fortunate. I managed to break her limb as she was trying to heal. Maybe I should show that off, just because it's a pretty rare mechanic. The other thing about Amelia's transformation is, even though she was wearing like white clothes, even her fur is still white, which does paint her as a kind of like holy, maidenly figure. And when she's using like that golden aura right there, it helps her generate her limbs. And this is her healing herself. That can be interrupted with the numbing mist, one of those important like side items that are available in the area leading up to her. And defeating Amelia gives the gold pendant. And one aspect that I like when you kill some of the bosses, you'll see like a rain of blood follow it. And so since Amelia is the vicar of the healing church, that identifies her as the head of the healing church, because a vicar is like the leader of a parish, and since she is the vicar of the Grand Cathedral, which seems to be like the central focus of the healing church, we can assume that she is the leader of the healing church. But it doesn't necessarily let us know if she still has like control over the School of Mensis or the choir in their experiments, or whether or not like both Mensis and the choir have kind of gone rogue, or how that power hierarchy really breaks down, which is something I wish we did have a bit more information about. So this is the gold pendant that she was holding, and it's the pendant of Vicar Amelia. We use it to change into a blood gem, which fortifies weapons. This pendant, passed down amongst the vicars who head the healing church, is a reminder of the cautionary adage, words that will open the gates of Bergenworth. So of course this does tie back into what the two notes previously told us about going to the Forbidden Woods and trying to get through the gate. Alfred tried to help us with our quest by telling us to come to the Grand Cathedral of the Healing Church to learn more about paleblood. And when we did, we found Amelia, who is, let's just say, in no condition to talk. And so having defeated her and gotten the pendant and seen the note, we can now progress through the Forbidden Woods to kind of get to Bergenworth to discover the source of the Healing Church, to see if there's any more information that we can find from paleblood in Bergenworth. So the skull of Master Lawrence is enshrined within the Healing Church, and it's the body, the holy medium, which Alfred was talking about as being the source of the Healing Church's blood ministration. So Lawrence was the founder of the Healing Church, and his body is what is enshrined here. If we look behind the skull of Lawrence, which is pretty obviously turned into a beast with its teeth, its elongated face, and almost snout skull-like, we can infer that there's a dark secret to the Healing Church, which is why they don't want outsiders coming into the Grand Cathedral and trying to find out more about it unless they've already been indoctrinated into the church and want to defend it themselves. If we look at this little golden structuring behind him, it resembles one of the recreations of the Ark of the Covenant, and on the side of it we get these tiny little messengers that are holding it together. That could possibly be the literal body of Lawrence, whereas the skull is still out on display. And above this coffin, which obviously represents death, we get a chair, although it's a little bit hard to make out from this angle. If you go to the altar in the research hall, it's clearer what that chair is. It's got armrests and everything. And that chair represents the dream, because in the alpha version of the game, the warp chair would take us to the dream. And so that motif of death being equivalent to sleep and unconsciousness, and the dream kind of transcending death, that's the type of imagery that I believe is being used here. And even above the chair itself, we've got the statue of a headless woman with an urn with a kind of liquid that's coming out of it that we don't really know, an indistinguishable liquid. Like I said in the opening trailer for the game, we can see the liquid fall from it, so it's most likely that this liquid is supposed to represent blood from the heavens, and through that blood we can gain access to the dream, which gives us a power literally over death and beasthood. And of course, just on the side, you just got people praying and looking above for divine guidance. So inspecting the skull, we get one of the most important cutscenes of the game.
Master Willem, I've come to bid you farewell.
Oh, I know. You think now to betray me.
No, but you will never listen. I tell you, I will not forget our adage.
We are born of the blood, made men by the blood, undone by the blood. Our eyes are yet to open.
Fear the old blood. I must take my leave.
So again, the concept of fear is really stressed throughout that cutscene. Fear the old blood and like the beasthood kind of goes along with that. One large discrepancy between the English and the Japanese text literally just kind of like hinges on a dropped particle, which is just like a small part of speech within Japanese. So rather than Willem just saying to Lawrence, "You think to betray me," in Japanese it's like, "You also think to betray me." So he's implying that he was already betrayed by someone else before Lawrence. And if we can recall, like before accessing Amelia, we talked to Gehrman, and he was talking to Lawrence in his sleep, and saying he's of no more use and things like that. The conclusion I draw from that is since Gehrman is related to Lawrence and Willem, it's most likely that Gehrman is the first person to have betrayed Willem, since he became the first hunter after all, and Lawrence was the second. And that I think it's really unfortunate that we kind of lost that detail from the English version of the game. I forgot, after we kill Amelia, we can also turn her pendant into that, the blood gem. We get a gold blood gem. And it is a blood gem that fortifies weapons and adds various properties. Most radio blood gems have effects that have effects that bear upon physical attacks, and this golden radio blood gem, kept for generations within the church, strengthens attacks against those afflicted intensely by beasthood. Sorry, I'm just having a bit of a hard time reading right now. Or seeing right now. When clerics began transforming into unspeakable beasts, their church needed something to retaliate with. Wonders asks, what do I think Gehrman means when he says, "Lawrence, what's taking you so long? I'm too old for this shit," or whatever. Bringing this up because you may not get the event during this playthrough. We did see like the first part of the event. I know there's like a second part. I think it's really hard to like talk about because I feel like that whole relationship may have made more sense with like potentially there being more connections between Gehrman, Lawrence, Annalise, and the scholar who gave potentially forbidden blood to Cainhurst. So I think originally at some point in development there was going to be like a relationship between Gehrman and Annalise, and them potentially either having a child or Annalise bearing a child of blood, which is a kind of theme with Cainhurst and all that, and that relating to either the moon presence or Murgo. And so through Gehrman's relationship with Annalise, there was something wrong with like the whole baby situation, which may have been part of why Gehrman got brought into the hunter's dream, and he was going to try and rely on Lawrence to rescue him. Obviously, like in the retail version of the game, like that doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a number of reasons. But that being said, like even as it is right now, it still doesn't make a whole lot of sense as a series of events. So I think like the current canon vision of that would be like Gehrman became the first hunter by like his accidental chance encounter with Flora, the moon presence. It's unclear whether Lawrence was with him when that happened, but since Gehrman may have been the first one to use blood, he may have been the one to convince Lawrence to like branch off and do his own thing, and so they may have had a more like partner type relationship. Does that make sense to you, Wonders? I mean, I know it's just all conjecture, so you can pretty much say anything and be equally close to the truth there. Alright. So, with the gold blood gem, it just kind of does show like the people of Yharnam had like superstitions that they believed in, and like believing certain types of metal could deal with beasts a bit better. I do like that idea, especially since like there's the whole like mythos of werewolves being weak to silver, and like with like the doll's blood gem, we get like kind of a silvery one, and a lot of their weapons are made out of silver. I do like how those elements like have played out in this story, and it shows like the church started to realize that there's something going on with the beasts, and they were becoming stronger and larger, and they had to kind of rethink the way that they were operating to counteract what was happening as a result of their own actions. So having defeated Amelia gives us access to the DLC, although it's very, very convoluted and not straightforward at all how to access it. So when we beat her, we get these messengers who offer us the gift, and it says like, the eye of a blood-drunk hunter beckons hunters to the hunter's nightmare. A deformed creature will whisk you away outside Erden Chapel. And that's a reference to that amygdala where we first met and got frenzied by. And this gives us the eye of the blood-drunk hunter. It's interesting that the messengers say like the eye itself is beckoning us. We don't necessarily have an idea of who like this could have belonged to. I don't really think it's necessarily important, but I know some people do wonder if there is supposed to be like a lore reason. Some could like believe that like this is one of Maria's eyes, like the true Maria, and like what we find in the dream is different. If we look at the icon itself, like the eye is occluded, it's got collapsed retinas, and I believe that's going to be like important in terms of like comparing visually what's going on with the eye versus kind of like the sun or the celestial body of the hunter's nightmare. Like they do kind of resemble each other, and so what's going on with the eye might represent like what's going on with the curse of Cause, and like once we defeat Cause, it might like clear up the curse on hunters, which causes them to see people as beasts. Although it's a little bit jumping ahead of ourselves, I suppose, but I'll just leave it out there as some more food for thought. So the eye of a blood-drunk hunter. Its pupil is collapsed and turned to mush, indicating the onset of the scourge of beasts. A hunter who goes drunk with blood is said to be taken by the nightmare, destined to wander forever, engaged in an endless hunt. It is a fate that no hunter can escape. I'm not going to access the DLC now. I mean, most people will know that the enemies there are extremely strong for this portion of the game. It doesn't seem to be clear whether or not, like, why now is the time to receive the item. Maybe it's related to Amelia after all. But it's just something we just kind of have to take for granted and roll with the punches on.
Honorable, and you will hunt beasts, and I will be here for you to embolden your sickly spirit.
Oh yeah, she just repeated all that because I killed her. I thought I screwed something up somehow. I was like, what is she talking about?
Hunters have told me about the gods and their love, but do the gods love their creations? I am a doll created by you humans. Would you ever think to love me? Of course. I do love you. Isn't that how you've made me?
So that line by the doll is one of like the most
very well. Let me
philosophical lines of the game. It really does bring into question our role as like a hunter, as a human, in relation to the doll, like as her creator, as like the Victor Frankenstein figure, versus
farewell, good mate.
Our role as humans in relation to the Great Ones. The doll posits like the church hunters believe that the gods are full of love, but when she compares like humans to that role of gods, she doesn't necessarily know if the gods do love her or even if they could love her. But despite that, she does love her creator because that's how we should have made her, you know. So whether or not our position is comparable to the dolls is definitely worthy of discussion. I'm of the opinion that like the Great Ones didn't necessarily create humans. I don't think they're gods in that way, but I do like
home. What is
the discussion surrounding that, and I just kind of like want to look at the dialogue again to just absorb it again.
Hunters have told me about the church, about the gods and their love. But do the gods love their creations? I am a doll created by you humans. Would you ever think to love me? Of course. I do love you. Isn't that how you've made me? Farewell, good.
So one of the things to consider with that idea of gods and their love and things like that is for let's say like the common Yharnamite, they might have like those feelings of love or affection guided towards like the gods espoused by the healing church. And so for most people that might have like a lot more merit. But one of the ulterior motives of those of the healing church is to transcend humanity and become those kind of godlike figures themselves. So to a certain extent, like the idea of like yearning for the gods to love their creation does fall apart a little bit. Like it seems as though the humans have abandoned the ideal of gods in favor of becoming gods themselves. But of course, like most hunters aren't going to know about that. Like the townsfolk of Yharnam generally aren't going to know about that. It's like one of the hidden things that like the false doctor Iosefka would be more concerned with. So I'm probably gonna die to frenzy right now. Oh. Maybe I have enough resist? Oh, that was extremely close. So, yeah, if these church servants do hit you with their crucifix-like weapons, you will gain that like little bar, and once it reaches max, it'll deal about 70% of your HP. And now that we've killed Amelia, the time has advanced once more, and so we have entered like the full night phase of the hunt. And this changes some enemy placements, like the giant church servants. They're kind of sleeping now. They're no longer patrolling. I don't know. Maybe they're lazy. They're just tired. So if we go close, like it'll wake up and become active and attack us again. But before we do that, I'm gonna see if the NPCs are still sane. And now, of course, since we killed those hunters from earlier, they don't spawn again. So instead of saying bless us with blood, we get some like more inhuman groaning. So I don't necessarily think these people are transforming, but they're most certainly going insane over the course of the night. And if we didn't kill like the witches of Hemwick before Amelia, they would still be sane to some degree. And this isn't just like a something that's localized to the Cathedral Ward. If we go back to Central Yharnam and talk to those NPCs or the one in the Hemwick Charnel lane, we can see that as well. They sound like toddlers when they're told to go to bed. Yeah. Before going towards the Forbidden Woods, I'm just going to show off some of those NPCs. I'll also talk to Gilbert, or most likely Patches. And maybe some of the NPCs in the chapel as well. So of course, like that's where Arianna and the beggar, or the suspicious man were. They aren't there any longer.
Help me! Please!
So yeah, in some dire straits, it seems, compared to where they were. Well, I guess I get poisoned from that guy. That's interesting. Especially when we consider this guy was saying praise the whole damn church
Help
before.
me. Please help!
It does show a difference. His like the head knocking does continue, that thumping noise. And the woman has some very, very interesting dialogue.
My baby! My precious little baby! Stay away! Stay away from us!
Her little moans at the end kind of always reminded me of that one scene in Ferris Bueller when he has his girlfriend fake like the phone call that their or the answering machine that like their grandmother had died, and they're at the funeral. So yeah. The whole point about that dialogue is the woman's crying over the state of her baby, and some people can take that to mean like maybe Murgo is that woman's child. I don't mind. Oh shit, my insight. So yeah, this will just kind of like show off the brain suckers effects. Like they get those kind of gigantic parasites that come out of their heads. And I did lose some of my insight as a result of that misplay. What was I saying about... Oh yeah, so I don't mind if people want to think like Murgo could have been that woman's baby. I mean, it is ambiguous, of course, but there's also the possibility that even her baby transformed. She could just be going crazy and hallucinating. And it's still like kind of up in the air how that should be taken, really. Wonder says, Engi's voice actor when you kill the fair lady in front of him? I'm not sure. No, are you asking like when I was talking about the scream? I was just talking about that woman with her baby. And so after killing Amelia, Alfred gets relocated, I mentioned before.
Oh, good to see you safe. Now, let's think up something to discuss. Just tell me what piques your interest.
So Alfred, in his mentor role, offers us more information. We can see like the hunter's mark on his executioner's uniform, which I do like the touch of that. The giant church servants also have a hunter's mark on like the base of like the head of their axes, and that's something you can see clearly in the concept art, or like if you invade somebody else's world and like look at the enemies up close when they won't become aggressive towards the player, we'll show that off as well. Oh, okay.
As you know, the Healing Church is the fountainhead of blood healing. Well, I'm a simple hunter, quite unfamiliar with the ins and outs of the institution, but I have heard that the holy medium of blood healing is venerated in the main cathedral, and that counselors of the old church reside in the high stratum of the Cathedral Ward. If you seek blood healing, and the church...
That's old information. I guess the only one news about the vile bloods.
Ah, there's something I want to tell you. A bit of wisdom from the eminent master Logarius. Once, a scholar betrayed his fellows at Bergenworth and brought forbidden blood back with him to Cainhurst Castle. It was there that the first of the inhuman vile bloods was born. The vile bloods are fiendish creatures who threaten the purity of the church's blood healing. The ruler of the vile bloods is still alive today. And so, to honor my master's wishes, I search for the path to Cainhurst Castle.
There's a lot of interesting differences in his dialogue right there. With the whole concept of vile bloods, that's something that's just kind of been played up with the English. The Japanese for that, rather than saying like vile blood, they will call it like the impure or like corrupted blood clan. So I mean that's a little bit wordy in English, and I understand why they came like up with the term for vile bloods. But the important part about that is he does introduce the concept of like a traitor bringing blood to Cainhurst. It's a little bit questionable his source of knowledge for that. It could have been Gehrman to begin with. It doesn't necessarily mean like whenever the scholar brought the blood to Cainhurst, it was forbidden then. It could have been made forbidden later after that had already happened. The important part to me is, in Alfred's mind, the purity of the church's blood healing is more important than like the idea of I don't know how to phrase this right now. So the important part is he wants to maintain the church's control over the spread of blood ministration. I think that's what he's talking about when he's saying the healing church's ministration. Although it would be very easy to assume that he's talking about like a literal purity, because it does have ties into the impurity of that blood clan. But essentially, like we'll learn later on, like that concept of impurity might be what makes the blood how it is to begin with. So I think ultimately the church is more about control over that blood ministration rather than what is in the blood. And that does tie into like Arianna's blood vial versus Adela's blood vial.
In his time, Master Logarius led his executioners into Cainhurst Castle to cleanse it of the vile bloods. But all did not go well, and Master Logarius became a blessed anchor, guarding us from evil. Tragic, tragic times. That Master Logarius should be abandoned in the accursed domain of the vile bloods. I must free him, so that he may be properly honored in martyrdom.
So in his first part of the dialogue, he talks about he wants to honor his master's wishes. The Japanese does tie back into the concept of like the willpower, or not willpower, but like the dying wills. And so Alfred wants to go to Cainhurst to succeed in inheriting the dying wills of his master. So I think that kind of is supposed to be one of the thematic ties to the theme of hunters being inheritor of the dying wills of blood and blood echoes. And so it's just like one of those themes that's a little bit harder
It has been may the good
to have gotten across while localizing the game. And since now we know the adage for the gatekeeper, we can gain access to the Forbidden Woods.
The password.
The door, Amos. Get
So that dialogue goes on for quite a bit. If you didn't catch it, the gatekeeper keeps muttering about the door. It's pretty unclear and hard to make out. And so if it wasn't clear before, the adage is revealed to us by our own dialogue here. The adage is to fear the old blood. And coming closer and inspecting or trying to talk to this corpse, if we look at our insight beforehand, reveals that he's already dead, and he gives madman's knowledge. It's a little bit interesting, like we didn't get like the ambient insight from talking to him. We just get the skull. The clothes he's wearing just kind of like makes him look like a modern Yharnam gentleman with his top hat and coat. This like spire that we're in is falling apart. It's in disrepair. It doesn't know for how long. It makes it seem as though what happened to Bergenworth happened ages ago, further muddying like interpretations of the timeline. And going through the gate does give us access to the Forbidden Woods, and we can see the windmills that I pointed out much earlier in stream. If we go, I guess it's not very easily visible from this angle. If we look back over Yharnam, we can see the moon in the distance. It's a white moon, and like its position and color won't change. Sort of in the Forbidden Woods, although it's handled inconsistently, and I'll point out like how it doesn't always line up, because it's pretty funny. And coming into the Forbidden Woods, we still have graves everywhere, although these tombstones are much different than what we find in the other parts of Yharnam. They more closely align to what we can find in like the Nightmare Frontier. These like burning cages have appear to be like tiny birds in them that are still on fire, and they like illuminate the paths. I'm not sure if there's like a whole bunch of deep relevance to that, but it's interesting that like they went through the trouble of making birds appear in these cages. And then we get some more of the butchers. Oh god. Play better. That's unfortunate. Ugh. Sad. So the current plan for now is to unlock the warp to the Forbidden Woods, to revisit Central Yharnam and talk to Gilbert and the fake Iosefka, and to go back to the Cathedral Ward and talk to the NPCs before ending the stream for the day. It's a little bit of a run between the areas. Oh, not paying attention. Could have ended in disaster. Let's get my echoes back first. I think I might be backtracking, but yeah. I do like how in the distance you can see like the little light of the characters, the enemies. It's got some impressive draw distance, I think. And this guy right here will throw oil urns, so if that beast catches you with his torch, it'll do a lot of damage. There we go. And so we also have another carcass of a horse. There will be a couple more throughout this area. And this one's on fire. And in this like a little cave, we get another madman's knowledge and another gemstone. I don't even think I can get to that guy right now. Oh, there we go. So this is the warp to the Forbidden Woods. We'll come back to this area later on. And when we talk to the imposter Iosefka, she should tell us about the fate of the narrow-minded man.
Oh, hello. You're all right. Very good. He's safe with me now. I presume you're to thank? The treatment is going well. Stabilized, for the most part. Fascinating, really. Here you are, as promised.
Oh, she gives us numbing mist for him. I thought I was... Oh, maybe it's his body which drops the pungent blood cocktails. So yes, we do get some more numbing mist.
Oh, thank goodness you came. Be a dear. Find me some more.
And just trying to show off that she is carrying a weapon, we can vaguely make out the threaded cane that she's carrying. That represents that she's the fake Iosefka as opposed to the real one. And when we come out to Central Yharnam, we can see the full night version of the map now. definitely has a different ambiance to it. The moon's location is different from where the sun's was. Now we are strong enough to one-shot these minions.
Glory be, you know not the value you possess. But more's the pity. The hours of the night are many, and the beasts more than I can count. A veritable hunt unending. Not even death offers solace, and the blood imbibes you. A most frightful fate. Oh my. But I'm willing to do you a kindness. Step lightly round to the right of the great cathedral and seek an ancient, shrouded church. The gift of the Godhead will grant you strength. Yes, I'm unquestionably certain.
So if we're familiar with Dark Souls, we might be able to recognize that the voice actor is none other than that of Patches. Having come to the store earlier, we had a different NPC talking to us. I believe this one was that of the woman's. And so, after a certain part of the night, Patches will appear into just a random, like the first NPC you will encounter. And so he can take the place of Gilbert for a moment, and like if you reload the area, Gilbert will be back, so there's no like real proper explanation for how Patches appears and whether or not he's really there or if it's all in our head. But nonetheless, he gives us the tonsil stone, which will allow us access into the lecture hall in one of the nightmare areas, and he's hinting to us like by going to that chapel to the right of the Grand Cathedral, we can come into contact with what he calls the Godhead, which comes from Shinpi again, which means the arcane, so like the supernatural forces in Bloodborne. It will whisk us away into that lecture hall. So the tonsil stone is a latticed, deformed rock, or perhaps a meteorite. It appears useless, but possesses some odd gravitational force that prevents its riddance. A dubious soul once said, "Step lightly round to the right of the great cathedral and seek an ancient shrouded church. The gift of the Godhead will grant you strength." So again, that Godhead relates to the arcane stat, and it's like kind of the supernatural force in Bloodborne. I think this line must have been translated fairly early in the process, because they call it the Great Cathedral rather than the Grand Cathedral. So there's a bit inconsistency there. Patch's dialogue in Japanese is I think it's a bit easier to understand, and like it feels less or it feels a little bit more straightforward in terms of like how the language is used, whereas I think like with the English they kind of dial up some of the quirks that Patches may have. So for example, rather than saying "not even death offers solace and the blood imbibes you," like I think that comes across as a little bit awkward despite like being stylistic. Whereas in Japanese he's more like the night is long, beasts are increasing, the hunt won't end, and in the end, you two might end up rotting in death or drowning in blood. Like it's less like metaphorical language. It's more concrete in that aspect to it. It is interesting that the tonsil stone itself has like its own kind of gravitational force that can't be discarded. I think it's possible like that kind of formation, like the latticed formation that it talks about, does have some connection to the nightmare. That's not super well explained, and it might be one of the reasons why the School of Mensis was inspired to put like cages on their head. Like the latticed formation of it might allow them access into that nightmare, perhaps even like using the amygdala to transport them there.
Not even death offers solace, and the blood imbibes you. Seek you the ancient shrouded church, hidden to the right of the main cathedral. The gift of the Godhead will grant you strength.
And that pretty much sums up patches for this portion of the game. Calling the church ancient, kind of weird. Yeah, I don't think that part of it was in the Japanese. I think they just kind of added it. It just says old church. I suppose like old is synonymous with ancient. Like the kanji that they do use for it, like depending on your context, can mean ancient. So it's not too terrible. Like now that I think about it, it just might be a little bit out of place, which might also like lend support to the idea that perhaps his dialogue was one of the earlier bits that they worked on translating.
Oh, a hunter of beasts, are you?
What the hell?
Glory be. But
okay, so Patch is in multiple locations. I don't think I've ever really seen that happen. Which is cool. I guess I should have like talked to him just to see if he will give me another tonsil stone for the hell of it. But I'll reload the area after seeing if Gilbert is any different, or if Gilbert still patches. You don't think it's a terrible translation? No, just weird terms of a timeline. Yeah, that's kind of like what I mean. Like translation like can be literally correct, but contextually wrong at times, if that makes sense. So in terms of like semantics, it could be a little bit off, even if like it's not an incorrect wording, so to speak, if that makes sense.
oh, a hunter of beasts, are glory be. But not the hours of the night are many. Not even but step the.
So no more additional tonsil stones. So they did cover their bases with that at least. But that is still very interesting that like patches can pop up in multiple locations at once. I'm surprised they didn't have like an event flag to kind of cover that. So it might be intended, who knows?
Not even death offers solace.
Alright, whatever patches. I've already shown like that some of the NPCs have already gone mad. I suppose I could show like the Hemwick Charnel Lane lady, but we could do that if we're going to go back to Canehurst later on. So I won't worry about that for now. We'll just go to the Cathedral Ward, talk to the people there, and then I think cut things from there. I think rather than just ending it there, we'll go back to Yharnam just so I could talk about the paleblood sky note again, because that'll probably be easy to forget about. And now we're in a spot where it's kind of easy to bring up, especially since like the full night cycle is still fairly new for this run.
Oh, hello. Sorry, dear. You're much too eager. I've only so much blood, okay?
So that's a pretty normal dialogue, and later on in Arianna's quest, she'll start to become more pale. So I just want to show like this is kind of what she looks like while she's healthy. If you look really closely, like towards her stomach, it's still fairly flat. She will become like impregnated later, and over the course of the night, her stomach will get larger after like the one reborn fight. So I'll just bring this up now and try to like keep a mental image of.
There ain't no more survivors. Yharnam's done.
So the old lady is in a visibly different position. She's like clutching her face, her head.
Oh. How did we ever get into this mess?
So she's starting to lose it. Like, this is one of the supporting reasons for why I say like the pale blood sky, the red moon is always present and always causing people to go crazy, just slowly over the course of the night. A lot of people think the reveal of it is the real like trigger for the people going mad, but I feel like this definitely shows that's not the case.
Oh, the good old days. What a laugh, eh?
So then she just more or less repeats her dialogue.
Have you renewed thoughts?
And so nothing too different about Adela either.
Brave hunter, I pray for your safety.
And the doll was asleep. That's what that black box is about. So coming back to Yharnam at this time of day doesn't change the placement of enemies yet. Behold, a paper. So this is one of the reasons why I think this note is supposed to have been important, although obviously very hard to pick up on. When we came here earlier, it was the evening cycle of the day. The sky was still called the pale blood sky. And when we look at it now with the full moon, it's still saying to behold the pale blood sky. Now, of course, it's very easy to make the interpretation like, hey, whoever wrote the note, like, the contents of it aren't going to change over the night. Like, don't be an idiot. However, when it becomes revealed later on with the red moon, and that the lecture hall calls the moon presence pale blood, it's supposed to show us that, hey, this sky is present right now. And there's another note in Bergenworth that will tie back into the whole Nightmare Newborn and the cries and the rituals, and it'll also give us some more evidence that like the pale blood sky is present as it is right now. And Wenders thinks the moon looks notably brighter from Yargul. Maybe. I don't necessarily think like the the geography lines up. Like, I don't think Central Yharnam, or like this is where it is in relation to Central Yharnam. I mean, I could be wrong about that. I'd need to like look at the maps, but like when we go to the Forbidden Woods, which is on the other side of town, like presumably like up through here, and then like continuing this direction, leaving out that way, like the Grand Cathedral would be like up there that way, so the Forbidden Woods would be a little bit more towards that direction. You look back, and I suppose it could match up a little bit, but it does seem like a little bit off. But anyway, the whole idea of the rituals being hidden and concealed by Ram, it's supported with like the kanji of Yahargul, the unseen village, is also the hidden village from like by Ram. So I just wanted to emphasize that again before we ended the stream. I want to thank everybody for being here and being active in the chat. So that'll conclude for today's episode. So have a good day.